All right, you guys are live.
All right.
Wait.
All right. So I guess we can. It's 1 o'clock on the dot, so we should probably get going. So I want to welcome everybody to this Google Hangout. My name is Jonathan Zaff. I am the executive director of the Center for Promise, which is a partnership between America's Promise Alliance and Tufts University. So thank you all for joining us. Really excited about the panel we have today, who I'll introduce in a moment. And really a special thanks to Penn Foster for hosting this Hangout in partnership with America's Promise. Both of our organizations are really passionate about the topic we're going to talk about today, which we're calling "Don't Call Them Dropouts," which is based on a report that America's Promise released back in May, and that the panel is really going to discuss the issues of non-completers in America. Not only what their lives are like, but probably more importantly, what will it take for us as a country to come together to help raise the graduation rates and move these non-completers to graduates and to being ready for work and for post-secondary education and for life. So with that, I just want to introduce quickly our illustrious panel, which I'm excited is joining me today. I guess to the box to my to the side of me, I'll go from there. I have Ray McNulty, who wears many hats, and so he is the chairman of the Penn Foster High School Board. He's also the dean of the School of Education for Southern New Hampshire University, and a senior fellow for the International Center for Leadership and Education. In addition to all that, he finds time to be the very active chairman for the National Dropout Prevention Network. Ray brings with him just several, actually decades of experience in education, everything from being the Commissioner of Education for the state of Vermont to working as a consultant to working with administrators. The list goes on and on. So welcome, Ray.
Thanks, Jonathan.
I'm also next to Ray is Elaine Bennett, who's the founder and president of the Best Friends Foundation. Elaine founded this organization, really the curriculum, back in 1987, where to really focus on the idea of character education and character development. And so she, and through the Best Friends Foundation, has been implementing this wonderful curriculum throughout the country really ever since then. And Elaine has served really as a spokeswoman on issues of adolescent behavior and development, and really is a national expert on all these issues, and has appeared on countless media channels, TV, radio, magazines, newspaper, etc. So really, again, excited to have her with us today. So welcome, Elaine. And finally, and definitely, I could say best for last, is Dr. Beth Reynolds, who comes to us as the Executive Director of the National Dropout Prevention Center and Network. Dr. Reynolds joined the Dropout Prevention Center in 2012, bringing with her, again, several decades of experience at all levels of education, as an administrator, as a teacher, as a principal, superintendent, has consulted not only in education but also with nonprofits, has served as an adjunct professor, author. Again, the list goes on. Again, she brings with her really, just countless years of experience of really what it takes in order to really fulfill our promise to children and really put them on a pathway to graduation. So again, welcome, Beth.
Delighted to be here.
So, I just want to really jump into the topic at hand, and I want to give just a brief overview of the research that we conducted to sort of frame the discussion we're going to have today, and then really jump into questions for our panel. The rest of the time, just so you know, as the participants here, you should have little buttons you can press. You can hit applause when you agree with something that a panelist says. We'll be taking questions throughout the time, and so please, you should have a Q&A field in your Google Hangout window. If you are unable to use that Q&A feature, you can also submit your questions via Twitter using the hashtag #chatnotdropouts. And also, you can continue the conversation online through Twitter, again, using that same hashtag of #chatnotdropouts. So again, please feel free to ask your questions. We'll get to them toward the end of our hour together. So the research that we conducted with America's Promise was really based on this really what we felt was a lack of understanding about what the lives of young people, of these non-completers, was. Um, we have this GradNation campaign to raise the graduation rate by 2020 to 90% in the nation, and we're currently at 80 or 81% depending on the calculation. What we wanted to know more about was what is going on with this 20%. What can we do to better support them so that they can thrive and achieve academically? There's been wonderful work about what the predictors are of dropping out and of completing by the folks like Beth and her center over the years, and it's really which has been so formative for how we think about what we need to do to both prevent dropout and promote graduation. But we weren't really satisfied with what we know as a field around what is it when those people do leave school, those young people do leave school, what's going on with their lives. So we conducted group interviews all over the country, 30 group interviews with young people who had left school, as well as a national survey of 3,000 young people, 2,000 of whom had left school. And we found three main things. I'm just going to get right to the gist so we can get on with the panel. But three core findings, overlapping findings. So number one, we found that young people are really hit with adversity throughout their lives, these young people, that it's really a cluster of factors which create a toxic environment for these young people. That toxicity might contain abuse they faced in their home or outside of the home. It may be that they have instability. So whether it's because they're in the foster system, it's because they're homeless, etc. It could be because of needing to deal with adult issues at too young of an age, needing to be the breadwinner for the family, needing to deal with their own health issues or the health issues of a parent, for instance. It might also be because they've witnessed extreme violence in their neighborhoods and in their own lives. What that toxicity does, and we know this from countless studies in developmental science, that this has huge implications for brain architecture, for the ability to focus on academics, focus on their daily lives. That can be buffered by strong relationships in their lives. This idea of connectedness, which was our second major finding, that time and again these young people sought out connection, like we all do. We're all humans, we're all social animals, and we all seek out connection. Unfortunately, for too many of these young people, all too often, every time they looked for connection, the door was closed to them. Whether, again, it was in their home, whether it was with schools, whether it was in their community, they couldn't find that strong connection that not only provided love. You know, one thing we did hear was very often that they had loving families. But it wasn't just about the love, but it was also that they mattered to somebody, that they had somebody who could help guide them through the adversity that they faced, and help them negotiate the many barriers they faced every day of their lives, and you know, could guide them on a pathway to success. When they did find this connection, whether it was through an individual, a peer, a parent, a guidance counselor, or through an organization such as a re-engagement experience, we see these young people not only bounce back, this idea of resiliency, which was so strong, this idea of strength and hope, which we saw so often in these young people, they bounce back, but when they would connect, when they create this connection, they would also start to reach up. So this idea of bouncing back and reaching up as our third thing. So again, living in an environment of toxicity, searching for connection, bouncing back in really amazing ways. But this story of hope of when they could find that connection, they started to reach up. And we see this again, this idea that these are young people who are resilient, who are actually the grittiest young people you'll ever meet. And what they need is an opportunity. And so really a big message that we have out of this research is that when we start as a nation to reach out to them, they will start to grab onto that and reach up. So again, just that's really a quick snippet of the research. You can find out more at gradnation.org/notdropout. Where you'll also see a much more compelling video, a mini documentary we did with young people in this situation who are much more compelling, much more dynamic than I could ever be. So I highly recommend you see that. And again, I'm happy to answer questions either offline at later date or during this conversation. But with that as the framing, again, understanding what these young people are going through, their lived experience, to now throw out to the panel our first question. And this question is around this name. So we called our report "Don't Call Them Dropouts," and we've been asked so many times, well, what should we call them? So I asked the three of you, when you hear the word dropout, dropping out, what comes to mind? What does that connote for you? And how can we start to change the conversation?
So I guess since I'm sitting in the lower corner, I'd try to be the first to take a shot at talking about this. And I don't think I'll take 3 minutes, Jonathan, but one of my concerns is that the word dropout is really, it kind of puts blame on one person, and that's the dropout. And I think it's a bigger issue than that. It really is a much broader issue. I like looking at students that don't complete a program as non-completers, but that's kind of that's not really the perfect answer as well. But what I do feel quite strongly about is that in life, sometimes you take a step back before you go ahead 5 steps, and it has such a negative connotation. We have a member of the National Dropout Board that is a PhD, runs a massive program, and was a dropout. And so it's kind of like where you start's not where you finish in life. It's kind of you talk about one of the findings was resiliency and bouncing back, and sometimes bouncing back from something that's difficult creates something very powerful inside somebody. And the dropout term is just has such a negative. For me, it's a negative framework. I've speak to so many students. I've done interviewing all over the country, asking students, that have dropped out, what some of the key factors are, and we know that I think many of our dropouts is because I think our system was really designed to treat everybody the same. And it was designed to be everybody shows up, you get 180 days or 185 days of first grade, second grade, third grade, 12th grade, and then you end up as a graduate. Well, there are a lot of students that don't need 185 days every year. Some of them only need 60 in math and maybe 200 in language arts. And the system doesn't seem to have the flexibility enough to deal with the issue. It's just, I think it's convenient for us to say people drop out. And I think the issue is so much larger than that. So my frame of reference is if we have people that aren't completing, we need to start to think about how do we achieve something that America's Promise has been looking for, which is how do we get that rate to be 0? How do we not say they're just on another path? What is your pathway? There's been many reports that talk about pathways to prosperity, pathways to this. What's the pathway? And how should we look at that? And when do we declare somebody done? Because some of these students, I think, so clearly you talk about, and in your report you talk about the challenges they face. Mom has cancer, dad is arrested, whatever happens in their life, they make a decision, and we label them dropouts. And once labeled a dropout, I think it's difficult. I actually, when I was a superintendent in Southern Vermont, I actually broke the regulations, and we would put students out on sabbatical. We would say to them, you need a break from school, that you're not dropping out. When you're ready to come back, come back. And I think that what we found was that really helped our students.
No, that's great. And we actually talk about in our hallways that oftentimes when you take a year off in college to find yourself, it's seen as a good idea. When that happens in high school, it's seen as a deficit, and we don't understand that it can actually be a huge benefit considering what these young people are going through. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, great.
So thank you for those great words, Ray. Elaine, do you want to take a stab at this as well?
Well, I was listening to Ray, and I appreciate very much the understanding and the heart, really, for the student. Okay, you dropped out, but you're not gone. You can take a sabbatical. You can come back. And I think that leaving that door open is so important. I also think, though, we have to accept the realities of some of the lives of our students, and they're pretty traumatic right now with the increase in certainly we know what's happening with teen mothers. We know only 40% of teen mothers finish high school. We know that 30% of all girls who drop out say that pregnancy is their that's the cause. And certainly many of the young men who have become fathers too early will sometimes cite that as well. So, I am concerned about creating that environment in the school, that nurturing environment early on, because I think the relationship of the school to certainly not just the child, but to the parent. Principals can enlist parents as their allies, and too often parents, particularly low-income parents, do not find the school a welcoming place. And I think they can convey that to their children. So instead of having parents as allies, which is what every good principal wants, parents see the administration as their adversaries. And this is something that I think can be treated, because teachers want to keep their children in school. Principals certainly do. And there seems to be a lessening number of programs designed to make children feel worthy, to create a positive peer group, and to involve parents. So it can be done. I've seen it done. And I think particularly the National Dropout Prevention Network has been very active in promoting these programs.
No, that's great. No, I appreciate that, because there is this idea of how can we change the climate in our schools to make them more welcoming to everyone. Because as you say, we so much need parents to be a part of their, to feel as if they belong at the schools as well, and they can be an ally.
That connectedness.
Yes, wonderful. Wonderful. Which is a nice segue to Beth, and would love to hear your perspective on this issue as well.
Well, you know what is really funny is when I was first thinking about this term, I started thinking that outside of the educational context, it's not negative. I can drop out of book club or choir or jazzercise, and nobody says a thing. They're okay. It just means I'm going to take a break for a little while, and it must be for a justifiable reason. And when I come back, they welcome me with open arms. But in the educational context, we have viewed it as a one-way ticket. It's not a two-way store. It's not revolving. It's one way. And a lot of that has to do with the accountability systems, and I do know that. And a lot of it has to do with the climate and culture that you reference, and also the toxicity sometimes of that environment. But we still have treated it as negative in one way. So you asked the question, about dropouts, particularly in high school and middle school, where the numbers show up. And what would we like to change the term to? How about this? How about if we change it to a term that means, you know what, guys? We want you to drop back in. We want you to come on back. Let's learn some more. How about if we change the term dropout to learners in progress? You're just not done yet. Anytime you're ready, we want you back.
No, I love that, because this idea of of so many barriers that these young people are facing, that again to leave seems very easy, and as you all know from your work, you can walk out the door, never come back, and that's as easy as letting the door close behind you. But to get back in, it becomes a huge lift, and so to bring down those barriers to reentry, to leave these doors open, as you've all suggested, could be such a benefit to these young people. So thank you for that point. And I think to bring that back, though, we're talking about some ideas about what we could do, and so Ray, I would love to bring back to Ray for a second, is to through all of your years of great experience, what are some things that you see as these effective programs? And then I'll also ask Beth, I know this is work that your center has done for so many years, is to get your perspective on what's working. What can we do tomorrow to start to change the dynamic here?
Well, thanks, Jonathan. I think there are many programs out there that we see helpful to students. And I like to always talk about these kind of programs as options and not alternatives, because I don't think there's one model anymore that really addresses the needs of all of our students. So some of the things I think that we see happening right now is the online world has added an incredible opportunity for students because they can go at their own pace. Young teenage mothers can take care of their children, and when they're sleeping, they can take their English class. They can, they're not learners. They have had a life experience that, whether we want to, whether we judge it in one way or another, they want to learn. And having a traditional 8 to 3 every day doesn't fit the lives of a lot of our young children, our immigrant population, new Americans that come into the country that want a high school diploma and they have to work. These are the kinds of programs, the programs like Penn Foster's High School right now is growing at a rapid rate, 50,000 students online, because they can take it at their pace. They can move at the pace they want to. We see those programs growing. The other programs, which I think we're finding quite interesting, that are growing and growing rapidly, are programs that are connected in some way with, I want to say, youth service agencies or Job Corps agencies, where we actually stack a high school diploma into something relevant into their lives. So the Penn Foster program there's just out there 60 plus Job Corps sites use it because they can take it at their own pace. Same time they can learn a skill. Youth Build. There are many like that. Partnerships with school districts that create some of these, whether they call them Fresh Start recovery programs, where again they're a combination of how much, when they need help from a teacher, it's a hybrid. They can get help. When they can do it on their own, they can do it on their own. I think the answer somewhere out there to us all is, the more options we have for learning to occur, the better off we're going to be. And to just kind of put a kind of a bubble on top of that is to say that there is no normal anymore. There's like the bell curve isn't there. It's kind of flat. And so what used to work for a lot of our families and children, it's not working anymore. And so we need to come up with a lot of models that we cherish for learning. And I think, in my mind, that's one of the great things. One of the unusual things that's happening, however, and this is something that maybe America's Promise and others understand as well, but so you get programs that are what we might call a dropout recovery program, and they have 100% of their students are dropouts, have dropped out of public school, and then they might have a 45% graduation rate. And somebody will say, oh, that's terrible. We have to remember, they're graduating 45% of 100% of people who didn't succeed in the previous system. So we're moving the needle every year. And I think we need to recognize that as being incredibly beneficial.
No, that's great. Thank you. And a lot of what you're talking about is in a sense the need for more information. We need to more research, more understanding of what will work for which kids under which situations as the dynamics change. And so Beth, what would love your perspective on this. Is knowing the work that your center does every day. What are you learning that could be helpful?
Well, the first comment I'm going to make is Amen, Ray. I mean, a lot of what he said we absolutely agree with, because everything we're finding supports that. I guess I would say initially that it's a matter of looking at it through the lens of the learner. What is it that our 21st century learners need us to do for them to make learning relevant and engaging and personally inviting? Because we have the spectrum is so wide now. I mean, it's so diverse. And so it used to be flat, and there used to be one way to do it, the industrial model. Kids don't respond to that. I mean, yeah, there's a percentage that does, but that's not who's dropping out typically, although they're physically still sitting in the seats. We won't even go there. But it's a matter of looking at some alternate choice models. I mean, I agree with Ray in terms of there are many proven models out there. It's not as if there's one in particular that I would say is the end-all be-all. There's no silver bullet. But the kids and what they respond to and what they need is the data we need to pay attention to. I mean, where does the data say that they are the most engaged? What kinds of programs? Now, like Ray, I mean, we're seeing great results in programs that allow kids to redeem themselves, allow kids to accelerate. So the whole idea of competency and being able to catch up is very appealing to kids, whether that be in after school or a totally different setting or within the school day itself. Particularly for high school students. The whole idea of early college is a great initiative in that when they can make the 9-12 piece seamless so that kids don't have those hurdles necessarily with standardized measures as the hurdle that they can't jump over. That makes an awful lot of sense. We recognize programs all the time. I mean, some of our partners, and I'll give you a couple of examples, we partner with a program that it's based here at Clemson actually, but it's a national program called Call Me Misters. And Call Me Misters is a national program that identifies and recruits African American males in middle school and high school and works with them and bridges the gap for them to come into post-secondary education to become teachers and leaders back in elementary schools. But it's that the components are the same. They identify the kids, they build the relationship, they mentor them and coach them, and give them the character skills along with the academic support that helps them to come back and give back. The National Climate Center we partner with. Overcoming Obstacles we partner with. I mean, I can keep going. Another one of our board members, has a computerized program. There's so many of them that have found a niche with at-risk learners, but they're filling the gap that traditional settings don't. And I think that's what we all have to pay attention to. There's so many ways to scratch that itch, and we just need to pay attention to it and look at it from a learner's eyes to keep them engaged.
Yeah, and so one thing we want to make sure to do is make sure people have the link to your website so they can access so many of these programs that you've identified. And another, so to throw it over to you, Elaine, which is there's this idea of working with districts for them to implement programming, and knowing that you've had that experience for so many years. Of trying to sort of penetrate a district and get them to sort of embrace the work that you're doing. What do you think is needed by education systems, and what needs to be done to sort of embrace a different way of thinking, what both Beth and Ray are talking about?
I think they truly do need to seek out these options or alternative options. I think Beth likes that word better. And they're there. They need to let their teachers know that they're behind them as superintendents, as principals, in the administrative end, by giving them the resources, giving them the time, giving them the opportunity to attend training conferences like the ones the National Dropout Prevention Network is hosting just next month in Louisville. I think risk students are looking for affirmation of their worth. They need friends, and that's a very dear topic to me, a peer support group. And I think it's easy to identify the disenfranchised students because they are the ones who are at risk as they begin not to come to school. You can check out absenteeism. We know there's a high correlation between absenteeism and potential dropouts. Teachers need to go to their homes, make home visits, bring that child into a supportive group, such as best friends, best men, big brothers, big sisters. Provide, as Ray said, a mentor. A teacher mentor has an incredible impact on a child. In fact, when we asked our students what was the most important part of our program that made them come back year after year from 6th grade to 12th grade, And, I was hoping, of course, they'd say the wonderful curriculum, and they did like that. But they said, we really liked having a mentor. And you don't necessarily have to have a one-to-one mentor. We had group mentoring where 5 students would be mentored by a teacher. But to start in the 6th grade and to be able to point to a teacher and say, he's my mentor, she's my mentor, is a terrific thing for a child. And mentoring really doesn't take that long. It can be 5 minutes before school, 5 minutes after school. But for the child to know that, the student to know that there is an advocate for him or her at that school is so vital, particularly for at-risk students, because often their parents can't be their advocates for whatever reason, either because of their own deficits as far as their own child upbringing or their financial difficulties. They don't have the time to be advocates. So mentoring is vital. And peer group, supportive peer groups, I think, are key. Carnegie did a study years and years ago that remains true today, that what adolescent students need, adolescent children need, is the thought or the sense that they are a positive member, a valued member of a positive group. And that can carry them over a lot of hurdles.
Yeah, no, love what all 3 of you have said about the roles of peers and positive adults in the lives of these young people. What we've seen when we've looked at various exemplar programs that have looked to re-engage students, so not to keep them in but re-engage, core element has always been that adult who's looking to create that special bond. And whether it's Homeboy Industries in South Central, whether it's United Teen Equality Center in Lowell, Mass., the list could go on and on. What seems to be that central theme here is the role of adults and what role can they play. And so the question becomes, as a big call to arms, what can we all, meaning all adults, play in their lives? But to your also point, a very great point, Elaine, about the role of peers and how do we facilitate groups so that they can really feel of this bonding to these positive social norms, to this idea of academic achievement, to a culture of success. So that right on with that. So building off all that, so as we talk about what it is that we can do to get young people through high school, Beth, you mentioned this a little bit with the early college programming that is becoming more prominent in the country. What are other ways that you all see the role of higher education in this world of non-completers?
Hugely. It's interesting because as we're having conversation, of course, we sit here on the Clemson University campus, and we have lots of conversation with our School of Education colleagues, and I've done that kind of work before. So I think the conversation centers around how do we partner and figure out ways to, A, do research that is applicable to what the issues are that we're seeing arise in the field, and then translate that research into practice. That's one piece. And the second piece of that is to help support practitioners in the pipeline understand and know what it is they need to be able to do when they get into future roles as teachers and principals. And then the other part is to bridge the gap, like I was talking about, with bridging the admission requirements and coming up with ways to support students to allow them to come in and have that kind of mentoring, follow-up support throughout. So all of those are different avenues, and all of those involve our higher education colleagues. I can explore those at length if you'd like some more commentary on that.
I appreciate that. I was actually going to just also get Ray's 2 cents. Now, as the dean of New Hampshire, an education program, what thoughts you have now in that role?
Well, I'm pretty much a new dean, but what I do know is when I think of things that we've done in the past, not just here at Southern New Hampshire, but at many schools and things even that Penn Foster College is doing. But one of the things that I see working is that a lot of students, we've been on this roll lately in the country of talking about everybody college career ready, and I've been one of those outspoken people that suggests, even though that college has all of a sudden become my career, that a career is a career, and college is a pathway to it. And there are a lot of students whose families um, have not ever experienced the college life, and they fear that. I mean, Elaine was talking earlier, which I think is so true, about families just fearing taking their children to a school in the community because they didn't do well, let alone the fear of thinking about a college. So one of the things that has been a really successful program that a lot of I've seen elementary schools and high schools and community centers taking students on field trips to colleges to see that, yes, there are people that look like me on a college campus. There are people in a community college that are doing things like building engines that are driven by solar power that are connected to, I mean, they see the word college, and it is as frightening and as complicated at times as the word dropout. It's like, it's fearful for them. They wonder, like, well, I'm not of the I'm not of the family that would ever have conceived of that. Now, I was a first-generation college goer. My mom graduated sixth grade. My dad did graduate high school, but no one in my entire family had ever thought about college. And a teacher really drove me to say, I think you should go to college. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. But I don't think I don't think we get people to really understand what that experience is. That's a helpful thing. One, two is that colleges need to start to recognize as well that there are a lot of students that might leave high school for good reason, and then it prevents their access. And that there are a lot of colleges out there that are starting to partner with high schools, particularly online schools, to get the degree for that student, get the high school diploma, so that they then can get entered into a college. And so there's many ways to create bridges that I think have not been there in the past. And I think it seems like there are great walls around our colleges and universities, and I think we have to build more bridges into the heart of the community. So one of the things here, even at Southern New Hampshire, one of the things we do, that all of our education students spend from the start of their freshman year on in some of the most needy schools we can find. Because going back to Elaine's point, a lot of these kids need friends. They need to feel like they're connected. And young students that are in college that want to become educators are great resources. So there's lots of ways we can work together to grow this. And by the way, and it does not cost a lot of money to be nice. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I think you just hit that point right there. Is that it's moving away from this idea of it only being about financial capital. It's also about human capital, and what can we do in our communities to your point, is kindness, to look out for another young person, to show that they matter, that you actually see them every day. Whether you're the person who just sits on your stoop and watches, the young people come and go from school and invites them for a chat, it can matter. So that's such a wonderful point to make. As we're moving along with this in our hour, I wanted to throw out, and I'll start with you, Elaine, with this question of, if you had, one chance to do one thing that you thought was going to be the thing, you could wave your wand to change the lives of young people who don't graduate. What would you do?
Well, that's a great question, and. Wave my wand, wave my sepulcher, right? If I had that ability, I first of all, and this is just something that is dear to my heart, I try to make certain that all children are loved and nurtured and encouraged to live up to their potential. Children are beautiful. I have had so many wonderful experiences with children who now are young adults who I'm in touch with, who have sent me letters telling me things that have warmed my heart. And as I said before, not all children, as we know, get that love and nurturing at home. That doesn't mean that it's over for them. You know, everyone is dealt a different hand at birth. Some children are privileged to have loving, nurturing families. But if you're not privileged, it doesn't mean that your life is over, that you can't succeed, or that you have to turn to drugs to anesthetize yourself, or that, or as a girl, the first guy who comes along and shows you some warmth and looks as if he cares for you, then you have to enter into a sexual relationship. I mean, this is what, when we talk about trying to convey values to students in the schools, these are the things that they need to hear and will respond to. So, first of all, I would love to see all children loved. I know they're not. But if they're not, then when they get to school, I would love to see, and I would wave my hand and get all the money or whatever it took. And I don't think it takes just money. Ray's point was good. A lot of things are not expensive. It's more of having that inner desire. There's nothing more rewarding. And I tell my students who are looking to, they want to make money out, you know, they want to go to college, they want to go into, you know, they want to run a multinational corporation. I said, but you know who the happiest, who really are the happiest employees, are teachers who have a sense that they're making a difference in their children's lives. So what I'd like to see is student principals, first of all, because they're to me a key ingredient, promote a wholesome school ethos. The ethos or the ambiance of a school is vital. My husband, as Secretary of Education, said he could tell a good school and from a not good school, frankly, by the ethos of the school. Is there order? Is there a sense of structure? Is the principal visible in the hallways? Are parents welcome to come in? I think you'll hear when it's not the children who've changed in the past 15 years, it's the parents. They've changed more than their children have. Children still have the basic needs, which are to be loved and nurtured. But again, as I said, too many parents have fear of schools and school administration. So I would love to see that nurturing environment starting in our elementary schools, building that sense of self-worth of a child and self-worth of parents, that we're their partners, that we're not there to criticize them. We know they've made mistakes, and they'll continue to make mistakes. All parents do. But what we want to do is keep that door open, you know, as Beth said, let them know that, again, you have options. And one of the things we say in Best Friends is past mistakes do not mean you have to continue in that same vein. Tomorrow is the next day of the rest of your life. So, Queen for a day, I'd have all the kids in schools feeling great, and teachers wanting to get up in the morning and see their children and have a sense of real accomplishment at the end of the day.
Thank you, and that's to the point of, you know, it's this idea of connection, of, you know, optimism about what you can achieve. And it's so essential. We know from research that really, you know, these are such important factors in all students' lives, and especially the ones we're talking about today. So thank you for those thoughts. Beth, over to you. What would you do? You just handed you the wand. What would be that one big thing that you would do to change this dynamic for non-completers?
Try to redesign, reinvent a system that looks at it from the perspective of the learner. One that has the components that we've been talking about as critical components of it. One that pays attention to relationships and environment and climate and culture. It has to. That's the foundation. The trust is what it's all built upon. But one that also has lots of choice and lots of models. and one that has flexibility. Seat time doesn't matter. Learning matters, and it's lifelong. So let it feed itself with good criteria and models and feedback and all that wonderful stuff, but from the perspective of what the learner needs to go to the next level, given where he wants to go.
No, I love that, because it really is. It starts with listening to the actual young people you're trying to support. And as you all know, and probably as the other participants know all too well, is we often give them what we think they need and don't actually give them what they say they need. So that's great wisdom. So thank you for that. Ray, over to you. What is your big plan for the world?
So I'll play a little controversial on this one, because I think one of our problems is that school is required, and it's required for everybody to be there, and because of that, I don't think schools adapt to the way Beth was just describing school, and the way Elaine was talking about people that want people. In other words, you're going to get the population that surrounds your community, and they're all going to come because they have to. That's the law. So I just, this is a whimsical thought. This is not, this is just off of being whimsical today. But what if high school was not mandatory, and what if they had, a student had, I'll just throw a number of $40,000 for 4 years of learning, and it had, and they had the ability to choose the kind of learning that is going to be an added value to them, to find the right model that meets their needs, or for the parents to sit down and say, as we get ready to what I call gradual release your child into the world, what are the things that we need to think about? And it's kind of a bold statement, but one of the challenges we have, and one of the reasons there's fear out there at times when we say let's give students, what if we packaged up 4 bundles of $10,000 each and said, this is the money that you have behind you. You can, this will allow you to get the type of learning that you want. And I can think of so many students I've talked to who feel like, they really need to be in a hands-on environment. And maybe there's incredibly wonderful businesses that would educate as well as train students, and that money is then used to support those students. So we end up building a proud culture of hands-on skilled workers again in our nation, and not just thinkers, but a way to really create some vibrancy in our society. It's we hold up very high the model of, and I'm at a university now, but we hold up the model very high of, let's all become engineers, let's all become, we've actually, I was at the National Dropout Prevention Network's meeting last year. Bill Bennett, someone that I think Elaine knows, was presenting, and one of the questions I said is, I asked him, how do we rebuild the middle of our country? How do we have people value getting up every day and going to work? Because the systems that we're in don't seem to have as much of a weight on that. And so I would want to be able to say, what do you want to do at this moment in your life? What do you want to learn? And then build on that. That's kind of radical. I mean, I have lower levels of radicalness that I could play out. But my point is, boy, I see students in some of our career tech schools in this country that if they had the ability to just, leap into a project, boy, they just love to do this stuff. We need to value that as much as we value 4 years of English, 3 years of math, or 4 years of math. We need to value learning by doing and not by sitting. So there's just a whole group of these things that we could create. So going to Beth's point, it would be so many options for our kids. That's, I think, what it's about. There's no middle. Might as well have some options.
Yeah, right. And to that aligns nicely with Beth's point about if you listen to the student first, what their needs are, and design it around them, it doesn't always result in a building with 4 walls and
exactly.
Seats inside. So that's, which to your point, it's provocative, but that's also what's needed in this conversation, is to start to actually provoke and to push the discussion and solutions much more forward.
Right.
So thank you for that. So I want to with our time, with about 10 minutes to go, I want to get to at least a couple of the questions that our participants have asked. So I want to get to a first one that just actually popped up on my radar, and I thought that's such a great question around communication within the schools. So we talk about connectedness and the desire for so many teachers to support the students in their schools. And one of the participants mentioned that when this individual found out about a student too late about all of the adversity that the student was facing, as the student basically had already left, because the administration basically said, because of confidentiality issues, I can't tell you. Now I know in some schools they actually break those barriers down. But in your opinions, maybe Ray, I would love your 2 cents, just with your experience, from the top levels of state government down to the classroom, what's your opinion on how do we deal with communication within the school so that everybody in the school can create this climate, Beth, that you talked about, and Elaine, you talked about, that can be most supportive of the students?
So I think I'm back on. So one of the challenges we have in our schools is that the design of our schools are really designed around cooperation and not collaboration. So you have guidance counselors that have information, and they only get certain information, and other people only get certain information. There's no real, what the future is about is really collaboration. People need to have more of the detail, and there is no reason that pulling together every educator in a building, if they have come in touch with that student, have a right to sit around a table with counselors and people that know about that student to have a meeting and collaborate on resolving issues with students. It's really I've never seen a situation where a teacher, if they were concerned, sought out the right people in a building and sat down and said, I'm worried about Beth. I'm worried about Elaine. I'm worried. I need to help them. What can you tell me? If they're on their caseload, and that teacher has a contact with that person, I don't see any reason to separate that knowledge from the person who cares. We in our society we do too much of that. We see people being beaten up on streets and no one wants to get involved. And even in our schools we have people that have information that could be helpful, and somebody wants to do something, we restrict it. I think we need to recognize that, as I would believe and I would support, we should be doing what we believe is right for our kids in our schools. And if we have good information, or if somebody has information, we need to make that information knowledgeable to those people that surround them. I'd rather, quite frankly, have an attorney come to me and say this was wrong, but we saved the kid. I'm happy with that. And as an administrator, I am willing to take that on, because I would rather not see somebody be compromised, a child. Somebody in the world, because once we save that, and save is probably not the right word, but once we make an impact on that child will, has the ability to pay it forward 1,000 times in our lives. We too often don't make steps because we're afraid of the litigious nature of, fine, you win and lose some. I'd rather be the one that wins for a child and might lose in a courtroom. That's okay. I think we have to do what's right.
That's great, yeah. And I think sort of building off that, and then sort of a question over to Beth related to this, on the research side. So there's a question from Alexia Poppy Finley that came in that asked about, in a sense, the forgotten middle. And so Ray, a lot of the people you just described, it's significant adversity. It's tough to get seat time because they're just not in the building. But then there's those people who are in the building, and they're there every day, but they're not progressing, they're not succeeding, and they're the fade outs, as some have called them. Beth, what research is there on that topic, and what can we do to support those young people differentially?
We know an awful lot about what are the key strategies that in combination support learners. We know an awful lot. We have for a while. So my answer to that is we need to pay attention to what we know. I think it's almost criminal for us to know it and not make sure that teachers and administrators not only know it, but use it in a sensible way and monitor that. I look at, I mean, I'll go straight to student engagement. I mean, a lot of the things that Ray's been mentioning, and Elaine too, have referenced a lot of this. But the whole idea, I mean, you look at and I'll just throw John Hattie's name out there, but John Hattie is one of the world's renowned researchers, and some of his more recent publications around visible learning, you know, condense meta-analyses across the world and on what makes a difference in terms of learning, and it's common sense. I mean, kids need to understand clearly, visibly, what the expectations are. They need to have clear models and samples of what that looks like. They don't need to just hear it. They need to see it. They need to understand what that means for them. They need to get good feedback on it. It needs to make sense. It needs to be relevant. They need to be given second chances and time to do better. It's not about evaluation, it's about feedback. So when I talk about that middle, I think it's a matter of taking what we know is true about learners and learning, period, and applying it to the middle, but bridging that gap that Ray was just referencing, making it career applicable. How does this relate to who I want to be when I grow up? How can I make this a doing task for students from their viewpoint, again, through the eyes of kids? What is it that this student or this group of students are interested in becoming or doing, and how could I turn this set of standards into learning tasks that allow them to do and experience and provide each other feedback and talk about it and show them models and samples? It's that applied research that makes all the difference in the world. It's how they build relationships, it's how they extend their learning, it's how they figure, oh, I see, I can do that. It's the connectivity piece. I don't know if that made any sense, but
No, makes a whole lot of sense. Makes a whole lot of sense, and it gets to actually the final question I'd like to pose, and I'll send it over to you, Elaine. Which, you know, it's this idea about this idea of culture in a school, and the question was asked about when there's participant noted as a culture of failure. And I apologize, this might have to be a relatively quick answer because we're sort of running against time. But when you think about a culture of failure, how in your mind do you go from a culture of failure where people don't believe they can succeed and they don't believe the school believes they can succeed? How do you turn that into a culture of success?
I think you turn it, John, by making it clear to the teachers, and again, the principal is vital, that it is their responsibility to help children succeed, that they have to be available to them after school. That, you know, forget this leaving the school building at 3:15. And again, when a teacher is a mentor and given that vehicle and told, you're mentoring these 4 children here, and they can come 15 minutes before school, 15 minutes after school. And when a teacher has some time in his or her classroom to talk to a student, what's going on with you? How are you feeling? How's your day? I heard from Mrs. Brown, you flunked your math test. What's going on? And then as we would hear from our students, they'd say, well, Mrs. Brown doesn't like me. And the teacher can say, that's not true. I know Mrs. Brown. Let's talk. And again, it's all the things that Ray and Beth have been talking about. Collaboration, pulling teachers together. You know, we have a thing called an IEP, an individualized education plan, which was designed to help our special needs students. Well, all of our students are special needs. And again, we can pull people together to say, Jane hasn't been to school in 5 days. What's wrong? Who's called her house? Who's talked to her family? Or I noticed, you know, Amber was over in the corner looking very sad, and no one seemed to seek her out. Does anyone go over and find out? I did this just last June and discovered that one of the girls in our program was extremely sad, that her mother had died when she was 12, It was coming back to haunt her. She was now 14, and she felt as if she had no one. And that kind of tremendous sense of aloneness is something that you can spot as someone who cares about children, as someone who chose that as a profession. There needs to be some more attention in our training, our teacher training, of zeroing in on that social emotional side to that child. It's not often because they can't do the work. They can't do the work often because they don't come to school, because they don't feel valued, or they don't see the need in it, so they get further and further behind, and then it's hopeless. Early on, they could do the work if someone were happy to see them, missing them when they're gone, and extending that extra effort. And that's what teachers at their finest are all about. And I think we've lost some of that. I think teachers are afraid in some cases about legal issues. I really liked what Ray said about, to heck with the law. I don't care. I see a kid hurting, I'm going to intervene. And I really think it does get down to that. We know, as Beth said, we know the formula. We have research that tells us if we keep our children engaged, if we keep them connected to the school, if the principal is a role model, and we cannot belie the importance of bringing in role model speakers, particularly for young boys. I have seen young boys turn around in their attitude. One in particular wrote to me, I didn't want to come to this program, I just thought, but I wanted to get out of class, so I came. And he said, I was sad, I was angry, and I had a lot of hatred a year ago. After a year of being in this program, and it happened to be Best Men, it could be My Brother's Keeper that the Obama administration started, or it could be Call Me Mister that Beth talks about that's at Clemson. He said, I changed my attitude. He said, now I'm happy. Now I see that life is worth living and that other people can be good. I mean, it's all you need to know is that with a kind of experience where a student who is floundering gets help and realizes that he or she has a support network, miracles can happen. And I've seen them happen. I'll leave it at that.
No, that's just, I think what you just said, Elaine, was just a perfect way to close us out today. Again, it gets right back to this core of what young people are telling us. What they want is connection with positive influences, people who can help guide them, peers who also are pushing them to succeed, schools that are accommodating, are flexible, learning experiences more broadly, as Ray points out, and communities that really create a culture of caring. So you just really summed it up very nicely. So thank you for doing that. And I want to thank all three of you for taking the time today, and for all the participants for taking the time to listen in. I apologize for not getting to all the questions that everybody asked, but I hope that this is a continuing conversation. To that end, just a reminder to participants, you can continue to use the hashtag chat not dropouts to continue the conversation on Twitter. We also would just love to hear your feedback on the discussion, get your thoughts on future discussions that we all could have. There are a couple of things just to note, which builds off this idea of feeling welcome in a school, which is October is National Bullying Prevention Month. So people should be aware of that, and that in November, to do a little plug for Beth, it's the National Dropout Prevention Center Networks event in Louisville, their annual event. So I hope a lot of people are able to make it to Louisville. It's a good time to be there versus in the Northeast where I will be. So I definitely highly recommend that. So again, I just really thank you to Penn Foster. Again, thank you to America's Promise, where I'm based, for supporting this panel. And again, this is hopefully just one of many more discussions that will be had on this topic. But aside from discussions, is that hopefully we will all really start to catalyze the action that's needed to support these young people. So again, thank you all for joining us, and I will look forward to continuing that conversation.